What's tissue? Several people
No.
looking for it. Okay, so what's the gland?
Thyroid.
It is the thyroid gland. What we're going to be looking for on here though now, we're going to be, it's endocrine system, so we're going to be focusing on the gland, the cells of the gland, and the hormones that are produced. So when you look at each of these structures is classified as a follicle. And within the follicle, the substance in here is all known as thyroglobulin. Basically, it's a precursor to thyroid hormone. So mix it with iodine, and it becomes the T3 and T4. And we'll go through all the details of the pathways on Monday in lecture. But just for now, you just kind of remember this is the thyroid, or the thyroglobulin in the thyroid gland. Now, surrounding the follicles, the single layer of cells, the simple cuboidal epithelium, the cells themselves are called follicular cells. Okay, and it's the job of the follicular cells to produce this thyroglobulin in here. Okay, so you identify the follicular cells, and really you can just say that the follicular cells produce the thyroid hormones, because really that's the ultimate chemical that's going to be produced here. So identify the follicular cells, and the thyroglobulin in the follicles. Then the other thing that you're looking for on here, all these cells that are kind of in between the follicles, almost like fill in the gaps. There is more detail to it, but all these cells that are kind of in between follicles are called the parafollicular cells. Parafollicular cells we know is going to produce calcitonin, okay, which helps in regulation of blood calcium. Okay, so you should be able to differentiate between the parafollicular and the follicular cells and identify what hormones they're producing and then the actions of those hormones as well.
So you said the follicular cells produce thyroid hormone?
Yep.
Thyroglobulin.
Thyroglobulin.
Yep. Now on this same slide, as you go down a little bit lower, you're going to see a structure like this. This is your parathyroid gland. It's the big network of cells that are tightly packed together, stains dark. There are some specific cell types, and we'll get into those later in lecture, but really just make sure that you should be able to identify the gland as the parathyroid gland and the primary hormone that it produces. You know what hormone that is? Parathyroid hormone. Okay, and it also plays a role in regulating blood calcium levels. Okay, so those are the two glands and some of the structures that you should be looking for on this section. Both the thyroid and the parathyroid is what you should find here. Now, the next thing you're going to be looking at, or the next slide you're going to be looking at, is kind of a tough one. Now I'm down on low power right now, and this is the adrenal gland. Okay, so where is the adrenal gland located? Yes, it's right on top of your kidneys. It's like a little pyramid or a little dome on top of your kidneys. But there's really four parts that we're going to be looking at here. We've got three parts to the adrenal cortex, and then we have the adrenal medulla, which we talked about before. We'll mention it again. So as we look at the slide here, the three zones of the adrenal cortex we're going to break down, and there's a little table at the bottom of that section in the lab. The zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. You're like, what?
What's the second one?
I'm going to go through. Okay. So the first zone, it's called the zona glomerulosa. There's a nice little section, it breaks it down in the textbook as well. The zona glomerulosa is towards the outer edges or outer surfaces of the adrenal cortex. And so you'll see this little region right here, kind of ends right about here towards the outer surface. And they have some kind of semicircular structures mixed in. This is all your zona glomerulosa out here. Now from about right here down, you're going to notice the second layer, which is our zona fasciculata. I'm down here on low power again. And you see the zona glomerulosa here, and then this region is all our zona fasciculata. And this one, like I said, it's a hard slide to differentiate and a hard slide to look at. But you need to be able to differentiate the fasciculata here from the reticularis down here. And I know there's a little transition, but you can kind of make out right along here where you have a separation of your zona fasciculata, and then down below is your zona reticularis. Each has a different hormone that's being produced, and so you need to be able to differentiate these zones. Look up close at your slides. There's tiny, minute variations that you're going to be looking for. Typically on the fasciculata, you're going to have more clustered nuclei, whereas down here in the reticularis, it tends to be more spread out. Okay, not as many nuclei, more large cells. So we got glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis, and then all the way down here in the middle, we got the adrenal medulla. So all this area down here is all the adrenal medulla.
White or just every?
All the tissue, well, the white are just some gaps or spaces in there, so all the tissue around it. This is all the adrenal medulla. Take a close look at that slide. Make sure that you can differentiate all the regions, hormones produced, function of the hormones, types of hormones, mechanisms of receptor attachment, stimulating signals, inhibiting signals, all that fun stuff we're talking about in lecture today. Okay, next slide. This particular slide right here is a slide of the pancreas. Now on the pancreas, you're going to notice that most of the tissue that you see on here, all this stuff, these are called acinar cells. A-C-I-N-A-R. Acinar cells. And they seem like they should be important, and they are, but not for now. We're going to come back to this and talk about the acinar cells and how they play a role in digestion. But that's later. Right now we're looking for these little lighter staining structures. These are the islets of Langerhans. So here's an islet of Langerhans. Go down here, there's a couple more smaller islets. And we want to zoom in on the islet of Langerhans and identify what are called alpha and beta cells. When we zoom all the way in to high power on the islet of Langerhans, we're going to be looking for the alpha and beta cells in this structure. Alpha cells produce a substance called glucagon, or a hormone, and then the beta cells produce a hormone named called insulin. How do we differentiate? Well, we lose a lot of resolution up here, but on your slide you can tell a little bit better. One of the things that you're going to be looking for to differentiate an alpha from a beta cell, beta cells tend to have a nice big round nucleus. Perfectly round, tend to be a relatively large nucleus. Whereas when we look at the alpha cells, they're going to usually be a little bit darker staining, and the nucleus tends to be more flattened or elongated and oval. Okay, and so when you look at the section here, you should be able to differentiate. Let's see if I can find a better section to show some alpha cells. Because most of these, what you're seeing, are beta cells. Okay, here's an alpha cell right here. So kind of elongated, somewhat flattened nucleus. And then you got these with the big, nice round nucleus. Those are your beta cells. Okay, so islet of Langerhans.